Okay, we're going to do some freehand inlay. That's where a piece of wood, thin wood, called veneer, is cut out and then placed into the wood, and it is totally flush. Called inlay because it's laid into the wood. Now you're going to receive two pieces of veneer like this, and we're going to do this one out of cherry. There's a template, I don't know if you can see that, freehand inlay template. We're going to do this heart shape. The way this goes on the veneer can make a difference. I think it's easiest if you put it so that the long leg of this heart is with the grain, and just trace it right in the middle with a sharp pencil. Take the maple piece, which is a backer, it helps support, and the grain wants to go in back of it like this. So, right, that's the grain going the same direction. Flip it the opposite direction. We are going to
Training grind and counter alterate. Please come to the attendance office.
cut the curved side with a jeweler saw. We'll cut the flat sides with a knife and scissors so that you get an idea of how to work with this veneer in both straights and curves. Masking tape is used to hold these together. I just want to avoid covering up my drawing, but other than that, tape can really go anywhere. Okay, I'm going to use the jeweler saw to cut that out, and this is extremely difficult to do in any way, besides using this guy called a bird's mouth. It's mounted into the vise, and while you're sitting, this is meant to be about that height, right? So the jeweler saw cuts here, and we feed this in and turn it. So ergonomically, this feels pretty good. Now the blade is teeny, and the teeth are right in front, and they face down. At least they should be facing down, so that when you cut, you're cutting on the downstroke. Now you'll note that I'm not cutting my finger because these teeth are so small. If I'm super aggressive, I could cut it, but generally I'm not that worried about cutting myself. The back of the blade is held inside the bird's mouth, and it rubs up against the back of the blade. This is the cut, up and down, with the back of the blade touching the bird's mouth. It doesn't go like this or like this. Turn anyway, it just stays like that. In fact, if you start turning and you start cutting into the bird's mouth, that's 1/2 inch thick of wood, and you'll likely break the blade. So it stays just like this. Practice this motion before you start cutting, because it's challenging. It's just different than what you're used to. Okay, I'm going to start cutting. Now notice this hand is holding it down. So if you hold it back here, see how it's sloppy? Like that doesn't work. So you got to get your fingers right up on it. And you can go slow. Just do it a comfortable. The back of my blade now is touching the back of the bird's mouth. I'm making a conscious effort to do that, as opposed to going forward. Remember, it's the veneer that is moving forward. The saw is staying stationary. Cut right out. That's the jeweler saw. It works great for cutting any type of curves. It's not a good inlay yet though. Like, I still want to round this off and make it pretty, so I'm using 220 grit sandpaper. Fold it up. And I'm smoothing off all those areas. In a second, we'll be working on the outline of this on our other piece of wood, and it's so nice if your inlay is smooth and not jagged. Makes it more difficult to inlay. Okay, so now let's cut the straights. And the straights are going to get cut, and I'm going to open this up now. That backer is not so necessary anymore. I'm going to cut there, and I'm going to cut there. This one I'm going to cut with the knife. Now I want a straight edge. Don't try to attempt to cut this with one pass. It's really hard because it's so brittle it breaks. So I'm going to do multiple passes. And it's light enough that I can stay against the ruler, right? I'm holding this X-Acto knife right tight. There, that's pretty good. A word about X-Acto knives. This has to be sharp. If it's got glue or dull, swap it out with a new blade. Okay, so I can do this one the same way and cut it like I did that one. Or I can use just a pair of scissors. It cuts pretty easy. So much faster than the knife. And you might say, well, why not just do this? Notice I'm taking it off incrementally. I find that taking too much off too quickly tends to tear the veneer and break it. And so it is with, depending on how the grain is. So sometimes a knife just works better, and sometimes the scissors works fine. Okay, I want to clean up these edges too, not assume that they are just straight. And the way I can do that is by laying them on the edge of this board, holding it down with the straight edge, and then using a sanding block and sanding them straight. Sometimes my cut is already straight, but not always. In fact, I kind of don't assume that my cut is straight because that blade and the knife tends to wander a little bit. Excellent. Okay, so now I've prepared my inlay, and it's got this nice rounded, smooth curve with two straights. Let's inlay it into here. The trick of inlay is to make no gaps at all around this piece of veneer. I'm going to cover half of the inlay with masking tape. And I'm going to use my knife. I'll start here. I'm going to rest it up against the inlay and score the wood below it. Now I'm doing this lightly, not hard. I'm doing nice and light. Notice I'm not going past the corner. If you try to go too deep, too quickly, what ends up happening is it grabs the grain and wanders away, or it cuts into your inlay, which I am not wanting to do. So just easy does it, nice and light as you work your way around, staying tight to the inlay. It's going to take me a few passes to get it deep enough Sometimes I'll do this 4 or 5 times, depending on how hard the wood is that I'm working with. But it's about multiple passes, not one deep one. You do multiple light passes to achieve a depth that is acceptable. My goal is not to go as deep as this veneer yet. It's just to score it and make it obvious so that I can cut it more later. Go all the way to my tape. 3 passes there. Now I tape the other side. Remove this one so that there's no change of location. Has to be exact. Nice and light. First pass, easy does it, gentle. That was 3. 4 passes. Nice and light to start with. You're creating a path for your knife. Excellent. Okay. Let's take a look. So there's my score. Now I've got to get it a little bit deeper. With the inlay gone, I'm able to press a little harder. I'm still not going like full force or anything. I'm just going deeper. Taking 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 passes to get it nice and deep. I'm going to do the same thing with this curve. This is a patient work. Okay. Now I'm going to use a Dremel tool. And let's talk about this thing. The Dremel is a hobbyist tool that is purchased from Home Depot, and it's mounted into this base. We like the base because notice it can plunge, so you turn the spheres and it'll drop on these 2 posts, and then you can lock it into place. It also has this micro adjustment, so look right there and notice how it changes. So if I want to go slightly deeper, I just rotate it back and then plunge it. If I need it to go down, I have to release it, then turn it, and then go down until it hits that post. Mounted in this Dremel is the cutter. The cutter is a 1/8 inch end mill, so it's flat on the bottom, or cuts a flat bottom. This is the largest bit that'll fit in this. We've also got thinner bits all the way up to or down to 1/32 of an inch. If we have super tiny little cuts to make, we can change the bit and make it smaller. For what I'm doing, this works pretty good. So to get the depth, really, you take your inlay, careful not to let it break. If it does break, just tape it back together. It's not that big of a deal. It's going to get glued down eventually. And I'm going to take another piece, one of my cutoffs here, put that on the base, under the base, and now the bit can drop down and hit the wood for a precise depth So I'm just plunging until it hits, and then I lock it in. So I don't know if you can see this, but it is like barely off. But hopefully works really good. Let's practice, or let's test it first and see. So on the edge, and do it by feel. That's really pretty dang close. That got lucky. It was so good. Maybe just slightly deeper. That means I have to bring the base up so the bit goes in farther. So I'm going to use my micro adjustment. Right now it's fully plunged, so it's touching. I'm going to rotate it back about 1/10 of a turn. And now I will undo the spheres, drop it down, and lock it back in. And do another test. Right on the money. All the time and effort you take to make this exact is worth it. Right? After it gets glued in, we have to sand it flush. Well, if it's too high, you're going to sand through, or possibly sand all the way through that veneer, and all your efforts are null. If it's too low, first of all, it doesn't glue in well, and then after that, you have this hollow. And you have to sand all of this enough to get down to it, and it makes this little bump in the surface, which we don't like. So spend your time making it nice. Okay, I'm going to tape this off to the side so I don't lose it. I'm going to now cut out inside. I don't go all the way to my line. And you go just about to it. Go slow and easy. Be patient. Okay, so I've got to do that everywhere. Notice that I'm not quite to my line yet. That is going to be removed with my knife, and look how easy that falls out. Just pops right out of there. If you try to go all the way to your cut, to the score mark, you go past it almost always. So let the knife do that a little bit. Sometimes those little pieces just fall off by themselves, as you see they've done here. But the ones that don't, I'm just going to remove them with my knife. This corner I'll pick out. Bump. That's all it takes. There. We call that the excavation. Now let's put our piece in and see if it fits. So I'm feeling it with my fingers. And I can press it a little bit with the back of the knife. That's a pretty good pushing surface. And I think it feels pretty dang good. Maybe a little bit right there needs some more. It's a little lifted right there. Okay. Yeah, that feels great. Okay, we glue it in. Just yellow glue works great. I've also got a caul here with some packaging tape on it. This is a piece from the garbage can. It's flat. And I'm going to put that over it and then clamp it. Move it away so I can put some glue in there. Spread that glue. Make sure to get it tight into the corners. Feels pretty good. Ooh, look at that nice squeeze that right there. Okay. That clamp right above it. And we gotta let that sit for at least 15 minutes so that it sets up well. All right. 15 minutes have passed. So you can see the glue residue around it, and that's fine. Feels really good. It's like nice and smooth already. So this shouldn't take too much to clean up. I'm going to just use a sanding block, and this has like 150 or 120 grit. Wow, look at that. That's all it takes. Blow it off. Job is done.